Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to another session, focus group. Today we're going to talk about Revit groups and links. Now, the typical user response to groups and links are the first one. Create groups is easy, but it's very hard to keep it from breaking. Okay, that's typically the most common within Revit. The second would be Revit links is too much like AutoCAD XREF. I want to avoid them as much as possible. I know that in the past, user used AutoCAD, had bad experience with AutoCAD, so they want to keep it as much away from it as much as possible. And when I work in my previous office, they also talk about group do slow the model down. So the first thing they will ask you to do is that ungroup everything. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work. You kind of have to make your model as clean as possible to get everything to work. So hopefully in this session I'm going to discuss about that. Now here come a couple of screenshots of some of the errors that you guys will encounter, right? So every time you modify a group, it tells you, if the groups is different, you have to fix it. And the other happened is that if someone else is working with you in a project, and let's say if you're editing a group and the other guy is touching the wall that's connecting to your group, what tends to happen is that you're going to get this pop-up message saying that, okay, you cannot edit the element until the person's saved to central. And what happens is that it basically would put you in this really tight spot where you can say place request, and then later on it's going to give you another error, which is basically means you cannot save it until you basically relinquished and reload the latest, and you basically have to cancel it, and then you could end up losing work. The other error you could encounter is that if the groups has it's hosted on a face space, and what happens is that when you start mirroring stuff, it basically tells you, okay, it loses its association to the host. Okay, sometimes it will break your group. It's something that can happen, so just be aware of that. Now, what is groups or links? Now, typically how I define it is that groups exist in the central file. Whereas links, it's basically you're just referring to another separate Revit file. Okay, I won't go through all of this. You could probably just stop the video and look at the differences between the two. Now here's the typology that we typically would use groups and links. If you're working on very small projects, you not necessarily have to use groups and links. When you're working on multiple big project, this is where you have to start utilizing both groups and links. In VIA, we do a lot of transportation where there is little or no repetition. So most cases, what you typically would do is that you would use links constantly, because the project, sometimes you will receive files from Civil 3D that is miles and miles apart, and Revit has this 20-kilometer radius or 20 miles radius that you cannot reach, or else it just starts to break down. So the best way to approach that for long distance kind of a project, you would use links. For multi-residential tower, if you're working on tower, you have to use groups and links. Okay, multiple build. Let's say you're working on big projects with multiple towers. Yes, you definitely have to use the links. Now here are some of the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, when you're using groups with large project, it's very good if you have a lot of repeating element. So if you make changes to one object, let's say you are modifying the units, if you make a copy of that group about, let's say, 40 times within the project, that 40 time is going to automatically update. simultaneously. The disadvantage about it is that prior to 2017, you cannot schedule them, okay? In the 2018 and 19 and so on, you can now start to schedule groups. So if you want to know how many units are within your projects, you can do that. Now the other thing groups will do most often is that it's basically prone to breakage if the conditions are not met. If the conditions are basically non-repeating, it will start to break regardless. For links, the nicest thing about the links is that you can reference them. And what I typically like to use it for is that if you have consultants that's still using AutoCAD, what you can do is that you can create its own separate Revit links, and then you can link all the CADs into that file. The reason why I would do this is that you want to keep their model away and as clean as possible so that it would not infect all the line types, all the errors from AutoCAD. You just want to create it as a separate file. And also, Links has advantages is that if you have very complicated level to level height where you kind of have to change, let's say the side is sloping, or you have a lot of variations in height, Links does actually help you, okay? Because what happens is that when you put too many levels within a project, what tends to happen is that your user is going to get confused. So you want to have separation of levels so that the user, when they work on a project, it makes it simplified for them. And if you try to do it within a project, yes, it could get very, very messy. Just be aware of that. Now, this advantage about links is that when someone starts to dimension, let's say you have a link model link into your central model, and if the user starts to dimensioning and tagging, what tends to happen is that it will delete your dimensions if someone accidentally unload the links. And the other thing is that your tags still will be there, but the user has to take an extra step to go back and rehost those tags, okay? And I do have a case where if you have links and then you copy them about 20, 30, or even more, it can slow down your Revit model, sometimes to the point where it will crash it when you're trying to do schedule. Okay, I will demonstrate that in later on, how the project can actually suffer from that. So in this slide, I just want to talk about the best practices. Typically, when you work on groups, I do recommend you do a big group and not a little groups. What I mean by that is when you have kitchen layouts, washroom layouts, bathrooms, etc. I typically like to do it more like as a massive kind of a group, not that little tiny one. The reason why I would do this is because it keeps your files very clean, okay? And it's also, when you have too many little groups, sometimes it's very difficult to keep track what's there and there. Now for the kitchens and the bathroom, I typically like to build a family out of that. So basically what I do is that I added all the kitchen cabinets, the appliances into a family, and that way you can schedule them, okay? If you're using 2014 or 2017 or lower, you cannot schedule a kitchen or bathroom layout. So if, let's say, the client has different types of unit layouts, right, for kitchens and bathrooms, you cannot do that in the older version. In a newer version, if you're using 18 and 19, then that's where you can do it. But I still don't recommend it, doing little groups. I would prefer if you just do the massive one, so it keeps things very, very organized. Now, The second one I would users should avoid doing would be to avoid group objects that has two-level constraints. That means that if you have columns, stairs, shaft, or any families with two-level constraints, try to avoid it as much as possible, because what tends to happen is if there is a slight shift in level changes, it will automatically break your group regardless. Now, you could get away with columns, stairs, if you put both the base and the height the same level, and then you give the height offset height. So for example, the column base, let's say, starts from level 1. The top would also set to level 1, and then you give it a height. Okay. The third one, hosted object and target object should be in the same group, which means that if you have a wall and you have a door, you should be within the group. If you put the wall outside of that group and you only group the door, let's say if you make a copy of that, it'll give you this warning saying, oh, that door is no longer there, and it's going to be excluded from your project. And this sort of a thing does happen from time to time. So cleaning up can be very, very messy. So it's better to have the door and the wall within the same group so that you don't have this conflict. The fourth one, always unjoin wall in the group. What I mean by that is that when you have a group and then you have one wall, let's say the end of the wall wants to kind of join with the corridor wall, what tends to happen is that walls will want to join with another wall. The unfortunate thing about this is that if you have this connected together, if let's say one user is working on the group and then the other user is working on the demising wall, you will create this conflict that, you know, this object, two objects are not editable, and you're gonna get this error constantly. And then it's sometimes what happened is that it's very difficult things to fix. And the other thing is that you could stuck inside a group editing for a long time and then you're not able to save to central. Okay, it does happen. So I would strongly recommend, if you have any walls that is joining to corridor that is not inside the group, make them unjoin at the end. Never groups rooms in areas boundaries, because editing is a very, very bad. So I'm gonna later on demonstrate that why it is bad. The problem with the room is that it's very flaky. It tends to want to stick to a level. So if you do have a level offset, there's a chance that that object will disappear from your group. And then if you want to recall it, let's say restore the group, sometimes it will not restore it. Okay, I do have instances in the past where I'd experienced this issue, and it was pretty bad trying to fix it. So your only option is to ungroup it and redo it again, which you do not want to do. All right, this number 6, always place the family to the level as host. What I mean by this is that whenever you insert a furniture or any appliances or any Revit families, I always recommend that when you put it on a floor plan, place it on the level and not onto the floor slabs. And what happens is that when you do that and when you group it, what it does is that it wants to break away from the group. Okay. It may not happen in the beginning of the project as much, but once you have more groups and more objects, this is basically becoming more noticing. Okay, so in my demonstration, I'm going to demonstrate what to watch out for and how to disjoint it from the floor slabs. Number 7, it's my pet peeves. I know that a lot of people, they don't, when they group stuff, they always leave it as group 101, 102, 103, etc. And they don't rename the group into the proper name. That could doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help me. So I would recommend when user actually built the group, name it consistently. Avoid grouping objects at different levels or different level offsets. So what I mean by this is that if you have furniture in level 1 and then you have furniture level 2 and then you group them together just to make it into one massive group, you pray that this two, they don't change in height. Let's say you have it in multiple levels. Chances are, if that level ever change, it will ungroup your group or tell you to fix it. So it's always good idea if you're doing groups is that stick to one level and not multiple levels, because the more multiple levels you have within a group, the more headache you're gonna have, especially when you're doing repeating elements. But if you are doing just one of, right, then I don't mind if you do it. Just keep in mind that for anything repeating, try not to have it. Okay, the 9th, it's another pet peeves. When you're editing groups, ensure your work set is set to the same as the group preset work set. So what I mean by this is that if you have set your group as, let's say, a furniture work set, and then now when you're working on the project, you're using work set 1, and then every furniture or every element you add into the group, right now it's going to have work set 1 rather than furniture work set. What tends to happen in this case sometimes is that when you're working on a project, you may have certain work set turned off. Let's say, for example, in my floor plan, I do not want to show the furniture, so I just say set my work set to furniture. The minute that you have placed the group in the wrong work set, what tends to happen is that it will start to show up when you start to print. So it's a good idea, excuse me, is that you make sure if the group is furniture work set, you change your work set to furniture and add your furniture. Okay, just the pet peeves. I mean, sometimes people avoid doing this. That's fine. And then this is where the BIM manager has to come in and help clean this up. Number 10, avoid nested group. What I mean by this is that when you have big groups, sometimes you have little groups within it. Try to avoid that as much as possible, because what tends to happen is that if the nested groups has some sort of different items or something, it will tend to break the big groups. It did happen in several projects I've done in the past. So avoid it as much as possible, just to keep it very clean and not having so much issue. Avoid model lines. This is taken, okay, so because the problem with model lines is that Revit treats them as an object. So if you want to, let's say, build a furniture, for instance, don't use model line and group it and just treat it as a furniture. You would create a family, because that line will count towards Revit count. Okay, it can't slow your model down. Number 12, if you built your families as line base, okay, do not put it in a group, because it will always break. Okay, it would always want to be placed outside of the group. So regardless of what you do, if you're trying to place it inside a group, every time when you edit, it will want to make a copy of itself. So be aware of that. For the link, best practices, I just have few. Okay, when you have CAD drawings or images, I always recommend that you put it as a separate file, Revit file. The reason why is that CAD will want to insert all this line types. At the same time, it's always going to give you all this render material 000-000, like all that stuff. That all came from AutoCAD. So by having a separate file, you basically dump all that unnecessary stuff into its own separate file, so that your central file would not have a lot of the junk. And also, if you put images into Revit, what it does is that it will add sizes to your file. Okay, so if someone put in 20 megabytes of, let's say, an aerial photograph, what tends to happen is that it will add 20 megabyte to Revit file size. So if, imagine you have 20 of those, and that file size could balloon up to, you know, almost like quadruple the size. So if you have to do that, put it as a separate file. Now, the second thing is that you could use link as a design option. Okay, I know that some cases, some people likes to use design option. I don't have anything against design option. In certain cases, I find links can be used in multiple ways. Design option is a perfect way to do it. The reason why I said use it, because you can, when you finish it, you can actually bind those changes. Okay, whereas design option, the minute you say accept this as your current one, the rest of the other stuff, it's going to get deleted. Whereas links will keep an archive of what you did previously, and in case you need to move, like go back to that changes, you have a record. Whereas design option doesn't do that as much. But you could save the central file, but again, it's just different workflow, different ways of doing things. Okay, typically I use links. If you have like different building phases, and then if it's too complicated and then you have multi-phase kind of a thing, you can actually use link to convey different building phases. Okay, if let's say, for example, I built like a school where you have like different phases for demolition and like temporary facilities and then the final building, then you could use the links to set it up so that it has its own phase. Okay, I won't get too deep into this presentation, but the option is there. You can do it. In the future, I'm probably gonna demonstrate, like, you know, how you do that. Always name links object associated to a level. So what happens is that if you're using a link and you want to use it for repetitive elements, I always recommend people to name the links the same level, the same as whatever the level they're hosted on. Reason being is that later on I will demonstrate in the file, opening up one of the Revit projects, is that you will see the different how many links is in there, and then plus where the level is located. The next one is that never dimension to a link file in the central file. Always place the tags and dimension in link model. So what I mean by this is that, again, I did spoke about this earlier, is that if you do any dimensioning in central file and then you dimension to a link file, you hope and pray that people will not unload your links. Okay, it can happen. When you upgrade projects, sometimes this will come back and haunt you. I just don't recommend it, but if you want to do it just because it will save you time, it doesn't really save you any time. Okay, so what I typically do is that I would put those tags and dimension inside the link model, so that if, let's say, someone accidentally unload the file, you can always recover it back. Okay, when you tag, the funny thing about the link is that when you tag the link file, if the objects is unloaded and the tags is still there, but when you reload that link, what tends to happen is that sometimes the tag will not associate to the object itself. So you have to go back there and you have to relink all this information, relay all this tag to the proper objects, and sometimes it could take time. So this is why I don't recommend doing it, because it's better to save time rather than doing all these shortcuts and then it's not saving you any time. Number 6, link can be used for repeating elements, but it can also crash your Revit. So before you attempt to do this, I always recommend people to do a test. Okay, so if you have, let's say you want doing a door schedule, I would recommend that you first set up your door schedule, make sure the link works, and then keep at it. I had a scenario where this did happen. I have door schedule, I have 30 of them within a project, and then when I do a schedule and reference to only one link, what tends to happen is that it crashed the whole Revit without warning. So try to avoid that as much as possible. So you want to test it out before you can say, okay, what's the limit? Okay. So that's basically the link best practice. So right now we're just going to move on to demonstration. Okay, so I'm just going to open up a sample file, okay, called groups. Okay. In most cases, when you're working on a Revit project, you will have this sort of a floor plan, okay? This is a group. And what happened is that, what happened with this is that you have a bunch of layout furnitures and et cetera, and you have all this tag. So one thing I always recommend user doing is that if this is not part of the group, make sure you disconnect the joint, okay? It keeps it a little bit clean for your model, and then you're not going to have a lot of this error. So if, let's say, someone's working on this, it's not going to interfere with what you did within a group. Okay, just a time saver. Now, if you want to add like some sort of a detail element to this, what I typically would like to do is that I would probably do a dimension. Okay, let's say, for example, let's say I'm going to do that, and I want to do that. What you can do with this is that you can go edit the group, okay, and then you can say hit this attach button right here. So by attaching it, you can say, okay, this is my dimension, okay, for type G. And then what you can do here is that you can say I'm going to add. Now this is going to give me an error, okay. The reason why it's giving me an error is because this particular object is not inside this group, and so whatever that object is not within the group, it will not add to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add those door tags. Okay, if I click on this, it says that okay, this is not part of the group, you can't do it. Okay, so I'm just going to add the rest of the other stuff, and when I hit finished, okay, and then finished again, what it does is that becomes part of the group. You can go back into this by selecting the tag and go edit the group. Now what I would do within this mode is that I would start adding in my dimension syntax. Let's say, for example, I want to do this. Okay, do a center line of this. Okay, great. And then I'm just gonna draw a detail line here and just say, okay, place it in this. Okay, you can also add text. Okay, once you start one up, I'm just gonna say this is a kitchen and finished. Okay, nicest thing about this is that right now, once you have all that set up, I can just say, okay, go copy, and I'm gonna paste it here. Let's say this is level 2. I'm just gonna set this to none and put it to the current view. And now what it has is that it has like, okay, attach detail groups. So first I'm gonna choose that, and there we go. So once you have this unit plan pretty much set up, it basically means that it could repeat. Okay, you change it once, you add what you need, and then you just go to the other group, just say attach to it. It's very, very useful. I do highly recommend using this method if you are doing a lot of repetitive element. Okay. Now the other thing is that the dimension doesn't have to attach to the wall itself. You can make your own separate dimension, like tick line, what I did for this end. All you have to do is just draw a small little line there, and then you can always make it all, to the edge. Now, let's say you have a scenario where the client's going to ask you to change the floor-to-floor height, okay? So what would you do? Typically in the old method is that you would move this separately, right? So you just say, okay, I want to move this up independently. Let's say this is going to be another 1 inch. What tends to happen is that Revit will tell you, oh, no, can't do it, okay? It says that you need to fix the group. So there is a way you can actually tell Revit to basically make all of this level 9 feet simultaneously. So what I'm going to do is that first you just have to set up a dimension, okay, like so. And the next thing you want to do is that you want to select all of that and give it a height, a global parameter. So this one I'm just going to say typical height. And say okay. And what it does is that it's going to give you this this little pencil mark. Now what you could do is that you can go to manage. Okay, you have this global parameter. Just click on this and say I want it to be 9 feet and hit apply. And what this does is that it automatically will change all your levels into 9 feet, as you can see it right there. Now this can crash, okay? I'm not going to say that it will not work. It does work, but it's just that you have to watch out what's going on in the project. I'm noticing that the larger the project, it will take time for Revit to kind of calculate, and sometimes it does crash your Revit, okay? It will give you a warning saying that it can't do it. So yeah, just be warned. Okay, this is great. Now what if you want to have like one level that is basically one of, right? Let's say penthouses for something. So how would you, let's say for example, let's say this one, I'm going to make it 10 feet. And I'm just going to copy this up. Okay, select level, level 8. Okay, for example, this one on the top level, sometimes the client's going to say, okay, I want this to be 10 feet. Now, how do you make this thing flex? Okay, normally if you copy it and paste it into level 8, no, sorry, level 7, my bad. Okay, it will work, okay? The problem is that your wall, it's gonna have this really weird offset. Sometimes you have to be careful with this because it doesn't like it. So what I would typically recommend doing, if you want to do this, is set all your walls. So you go edit the wall, select the wall, okay? And change the top constraint to unconnected. Okay, just leave it like that and say finished. Now what you're gonna do is that you're gonna copy that and paste the line. Let's say I want to put it in level 7. Go to 3D view. And now what I'm gonna do with this is that I'm gonna make that wall okay, I'm just gonna select that wall, just multiple walls. Okay, and then I'm just gonna say attach it to the underside. Okay, and now what happened is that that wall is attached to the underside. You can just theoretically move this, and you notice that it would not break your group. Okay, very, very efficient. Okay, this is a good idea if you have one units that you think it's going to be the same for, let's say, different levels. In the past, what people will do is that if there is a level changes, people would create that particular different group for that particular height. Now, if you have 4 or 5 of the same type and then you want to do that, imagine how many time you have to waste to update all those changes, and then consistency just goes down. So whereas this way, you will keep the walls to the underside of the ceiling, and it's great, and then you don't have to do much. Now, a couple things, a couple of errors that you guys should be watching out for when you're doing groups. Okay, I know that sometimes you, as an architect, you have to use structural columns. And what happens with the structural columns is that you kind of have to do floor by floor, okay? You do floor by floor, and this is what you got from consultants. Now, the problem with the grouping the columns, I'm just going to group it, let's say column. We copy this and paste it, let's say, to the upper level, let's say level 7. You notice that it will say -5'8". Okay, this is automatically adjust to whatever that's the distance. The problem with this is that you cannot have the same treatment for the attachment to the underside of the floor slab as much as the wall. So let's say, for example, if I want to attach it to the underside, it tells you that, oh, can't do it. So you kind of have to break it out of the group. Okay, so this is where columns, I would typically recommend user, if you want to do it this way, I would just say, for architectural people, if let's say structural is doing their own model, I typically just do it from top to bottom, just one column. That way you're just dealing with one column, you're not dealing with multiple columns. And most of the time, structural will use analytical for their structural side, but for us, we don't really care, we just care about representation. So this sort of idea is like, you don't have to group your columns, you could just put one column at one level and then just pop it up to whatever is the underside. Now, something to keep in mind when you have a furniture, let's say, for example, you have this furniture. Let's say I'm going to edit that. Let's say I'm going to create one new. Okay, you notice that right now it's highlighting some sort of an object, right? I don't know where. Let's say I'm going to place it there, and then when you hit finished, okay, you see that it basically plays in that particular generic floor right there. Okay, that's a bad sign because you want to avoid this as much as possible. And I also place it in the wrong level, and then sometimes what tends to happen is that Revit will start shifting this level origin set point. So to kind of counter that, I would always put cut and paste the same place rather than doing this method, right? Do not use remove, okay? The minute you set remove, let's say you have 40 different groups of the same group, what it does is that it basically take all of this thing and then put it outside, which is not good. So avoid having that, okay? Always use cut if you want to do that. Now, the next thing you want to do is that you want to detach your level 1 from the floor. So how would you do it? In the new 2019, it has a level, okay, under 3D. For this particular cases, you don't have that. So what you have to do is that you have to go to the elevation, okay? You select that object and you say pick hose. I want it to be on level 7, okay? If you do that, you see that it's going to place it on right on that level 7. So I'm just going to move this furniture right here. And now what you can do is that you can go edit and then say add that particular object and then say finish, and then the rest will follow with it. Okay, kind of simple things, something to watch out for, because I know that whenever you have a new user working on the project, they just accidentally just place it on a floor and not realizing that it's host to a floor and not to a level. Okay, those are a couple pet peeves that users should be aware of. So if you are adding furniture, I do recommend that, let's say this is your floor. This one in particular not showing up. Let's say, for example, you have a floor. Okay, that's your floor. What I typically like to do is that when I edit the group, the first thing I would do is that I place it outside of the floor slab. Okay, sometimes you have that piece of core with a hole. You can still do that. Okay, just use that. But for this case, I just like to put it on the outside. Okay, and then after that, just move it in. Or else what you do is that you just copy from the existing. And now what happens is that it's always going to be hosted on level 2. All right, so my next thing I'm going to discuss about is links, what we do with links. So I have a file, okay, so I'm just going to use CAD Links. So what I typically do with CAD Links, I'm just going to start a new project. So you can start at any new projects. So the first thing I would do is that when I start out with any new project, especially for the CAD Links, if you only want to use it for referencing, I would just say just duplicate from level 1 and just say this is going to be CAD and call it like level 1. Okay, and then I'm just going to say I'm going to save it into the CAD link and just say this is CAD Links. Okay, next thing you do is that you go to our CAD link. Okay, and then I'm just going to say new base. I always choose the current view only. Preserve. I always set to visible. Do not correct lines that's off axis. You don't want to do this. Never, never, never. I don't know why Autodesk always keep it like this. This is not very useful. Imagine if you click this on and then you have all your property line. That's the funny thing, is that if you check this on and then you are importing a survey drawing, it's going to make all your lines to be 90 degrees or 0 degrees absolute and stuff like that, and it's not correct. Okay, something to keep in mind is that I always keep it off. Okay, so I link it in here. Okay, and it's going to zoom out. So this is what it looks like. So what happened with this is that you can start changing the color. So what I like to do is that I like to select the CAD Links, overwrite the element by override it, set my transparency to 50%, and I always like to put it like if you want black and white or gray. I typically like to put it as if you're doing it more of collaboration, I just put it like a different color. Okay, and hit apply. And the other thing you should always think about doing is that put it at the foreground, so that whenever you link this into your main model, your CAD link is always going to be showing on top. Okay. Now you can keep doing this. Let's say, for example, this is level 1. First, I have to establish where my 0, 0 is going to be. Okay, so it's always good to say, okay, this is my base point. Okay, that's my base point, and then you can move it if you wanted to. If your CAD drawings are good, like the 0, 0 point is already established, you can skip this point, but in this case it hasn't been moved, so I just say, okay, this is my new insertion point, and I'm gonna go in there, and then I'm just gonna place it there. Okay, so in here I just like to do that. The next thing I like to do in this particular file is that I like to put masking region. Okay, the reason why I like to do this is that to make sure that the users are not confused with what are they looking at. So what I like to do is change it to invisible line. Okay, now what I like to do here is that I like to duplicate with detailing. So with level 2, okay, I'm just gonna say this is level 2. I'm gonna go wireframe. So what I can do in this particular cases is that I could just say move that to that location, and you keep repeating that process. Okay, so let's say that's gonna hide. Again, I'm just gonna do it, right click, surface transparency 50%, keep it like that, and then this is already have foreground. So once I've done that, establish, always make it the same name. So let's say level 3 to level 2 to 4. Okay, it says that 2, 3, and 4. I do the same thing. I just say level 2, 3, and 4. Once you've done that, just exit out of that particular set. I'm just gonna close it out. Sure. Now when you start with a new project, let's say I'm gonna go new project. And then if you want to insert in that particular file, okay, CAD link, origin to origin. Okay, now it doesn't have anything until you call it up. So what I'd like to do in here is that I like to go into Revit link. You see that the links is there. Click on that. I say by link view and say I want it to be CAD level 1, and then hit apply. Okay. You see If you put a masking region, it would just hide the stuff. But if you turn on the wireframe, it shows everything. So that's the nice thing. It's just kind of like a little bit of detail just to tell people that, okay, this is stuff that you want to work on. So, and then level 2, and I'll just go back in here and just change it to level 2 to 4 and hit apply. Okay, and I'm just going to go back and hide that. Okay, so in CAD Links, you can just keep duplicating level 1 forever. You don't have to change level, because what you're doing is that you're basically just referencing a plan. It doesn't care what level it is. So all you have to do is just duplicating level 1 forever, and just link it in as current view. And then what happens that in this particular file, you just call it up as is. Okay, this is a very, very good strategy, especially if you want to do a lot of CAD drawings, and then you want to collaborate between different disciplines, from mechanical, electrical. So this sort of a strategy does help you if you have consultants that's still using AutoCAD. Okay, you just create that files, create different levels, create different CAD link files, and then you just basically say reference to that view. Now, you could use this for 3D coordination as well. So if you have to do it, then yes, I would recommend creating a level and then put it, insert CAD link, and do not set to current view. Okay, so if you want to do it more of a 3D kind of a thing, so that you can show and coordinate in 3D, make sure this is turned off. But the rest, yeah, you can just do whatever you want. All right, the other thing I should talk about is that why you should not be grouping, I'll just turn this off. Why you should not be grouping the area plans. So in here, I'm just gonna create my own area plan. Plan view, okay. Area plan, I'm just gonna create one level, no. So, let's say, for example, you want to create a simple, let's say an L shape. Okay, let's say this is your area, and then you have a boundary in there. Oops, come on, area. There we go. Okay, so here I'm just gonna turn on the fill. And let's change it to 200 so user can see it. I'm just going to turn this off. Hide categories. Now, let's say you want to group this. Okay, so that's the next thing I'm going to go to group. I'm just going to say, okay, this is my area, and then call this area tag. Okay, let's say I have this. I want to copy this multiple times, so I'm just going to put it there and put it up here and copy it up here. Okay, let's say, for example, someone go in there, I want to add a line, a boundary. Let's say I'm going to change this boundary to, let's say, there. I want to copy this, copy that. Excuse me. And then I'm just going to trim it. Let's say this is kind of like my new area. Okay, it does work. Great, this is good. But in the past, what typically happens is that this file's light. As you keep moving on and work more and more into the project, there's a chance that this will break. Okay, for some odd reason, if you start mirroring and do a lot of the other stuff, okay, right now it doesn't. Right now it's supposed to work, but there's a chance that your area boundary will want to disjoint from your area. Okay, there's a chance. Okay, Revit just does not treat this area boundary very kindly. Right now it works fine because I only have several small objects, but once you have multiple objects, just be aware. Right now it works fine. Okay. What happened in the past is that the minute I start editing this whole area region copy itself outside of that line. And then what you have is that you have a duplicating objects on top of another objects. This is pretty, I would say, substantial. If you can get it to work and then you don't touch it, that's fine. Do it. But now, like right now, I'm just working on a new project. It has no data, so it's fine. But once you have a lot of data, multiple data, maybe I should open up a project just to demonstrate that. Because this one doesn't have a lot of the issues. But once you start working on, let's say, projects, you will start to see that. Okay, performance will take a hit, and stuff will just not working the way it's supposed to. Okay, let's say I'm gonna work on this project. Okay, just load it in. So this is a typical projects. Ignore. Okay, so let's say this is a typical projects, and I have this area already pre-built. Okay, so let's say if it's in there, I'm just going to turn it on. Okay, it's not. Okay, it's there. So in here, for example, what I want to do is that, oh, I forgot. I want that. And then I want that area as well. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is that I want to group this and say this is level 1. Oh, Jesus, what is going on? Oh, model doesn't exist. File's not saved. That's fine. Okay, what do you want? Okay, I'm going to close it again, just say close the file. I should just detach it, just to keep it simple. So detach from central, detach it. Okay, pretty lightweight file. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to level 1. Just turn all the areas, the fills. So let's say, for example, in this particular cases, I want to isolate category. And I want to basically select that and group it and say I want this to be area 1. Okay. Nothing special, just copy it, and let's say I'm going to place it into my other file, let's say here, and current view. Okay, let's start editing that file. Okay. So for instance, I'm going to move that out. Okay, everything works. The area is not close to region, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then I'm just going to go in to this particular cases, just gonna go edit, see what if it breaks. Okay, everything not look too shabby. Okay, let's start doing this when you have more data. See how that goes. Okay, oops. Alrighty, so yeah, so this just illustrates that, you know, sometimes grouping area boundaries, it's just that you're gonna get 50-50 chance of working, and sometimes it's just not working. Okay, it's just like you have no control what will work and what not work. Okay, just my past experience always indicate that this will not work. Like next time when I save to central, next time I come back and someone modifying it, it was starts to break on them, and it was unfortunate because that did impact a lot of our a lot of the areas, and then I have to redo a lot of this area boundaries, and it was not fun. Okay, just keep in mind. So I'm just trying to pass down that knowledge, is that it does happen. From this demonstration, it doesn't seem like it's happening because the files are small, but once you get to a massive project and you start doing this at multiple levels, multiple towers, kind of a setup, you will see the group breaks down, okay? Because there's so much massive data, and this is why I just put out that noticing that don't do it. okay? But please, always, I recommend people testing their stuff out before you do anything. Okay, the last thing I'm going to demonstrate is that the multiple links, okay? Okay, this particular project is has about 40 plus links, okay? Basically, it's composed of basically a tower with the exterior skin. I should show you how simple is the skin. Now, if you want to load your Revit faster, I always have just close it. Say detach. Now, the problem with this is that the links itself is not that heavy. It's only the exterior skin is only 5 megabytes. The problem is that once you hit 40, if I copy it 40 times, if I want to schedule one of the links, Revit will crash without any warning. It just tells you, nope, sorry, this thing will crash. It probably fixed in 2017. I haven't tested it out. This was happening in 2016. Yeah, so different version, you kind of have to do a lot of experiment and see, you know, what works and what not work. Okay, so this is the links. I'm just going to show it to you. It's pretty simple. So this is the kind of like the exterior skin. So this is kind of the skin. There's nothing to it. It's pretty lightweight. It's only like 5 megabytes. So if I go open that up, just show the size, you notice that it's only 5 megabytes, so it's not that big. But once you place it inside a model, okay, this one doesn't have anything. So what I want to do is that I want to open up certain things. So I'm probably going to open up that Revit links and structure, just say open that. The rest I just want to close it so that it doesn't open. Okay, so I'm going to zoom extent. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Okay, imagine you have all the links. Okay, so here I'm just going to go insert links. Right now it's not loaded, okay? By default, I just want to make this thing very lightweight so that people can open it. So here I'm just going to say reload from and say, okay, I want to open it from there. Sure, why not? Do not display again. Okay, that one works. And then this one, I just want to say reload from. And then this is what it looks like with the links are loaded. Okay, that's what it looks like. So you notice that it will chugs, okay? Let's say I'm gonna go into level 1. Okay, the links happen at the upper level, and what happened is that I should do the before and after. Let's say I'm gonna turn off all the links. So right now I don't have links loaded in here, which is fine. So right now when I zoom in and I go pan and zoom and do all that stuff, it works fine. Now imagine if I have this thing on by default. Okay, let's see the performance, how much the floor plan is going to get impacted. Okay, right now it's not that bad, but once you have more and more objects in there, this does slow it down. I just don't know what it's at, like 2016. Now what I typically like to do is that with the skin is that I like to put in some sort of level, so I know what level they're in. So one of the rules I suggest for people to do is that when you go into the link itself, you always add an information telling you what level they're in. So in this particular instance, this skin, oops, not that one, that one. So here I always add, like, okay, if this is level 5, I put level 5, and then if this is level 6, I put level 6. So what this does is that it basically gives you ability to know what level they're in and what you can turn on and off. Let's say, for example, here you have a lot, 30 to 41. Okay, so that's 41, and then you have like lots and lots. So give you an option to kind of turn things off. Let's say, for example, I want to turn off everything except for level 3, and same as this. Just want to turn everything off except for that. Okay, there we go. So you can just easily control what level you want to see. Okay, and you don't have to load everything, which is nice. This does helps you a lot, especially you want to know or organize where you want your Revit file. Okay, hopefully that covers everything for today. If you have any questions, yeah, feel free to let me know. Just give me a shout or just message me. Thanks.